Relativity is a web-based platform that runs over the HTTPS protocol and has a 128-bit secure socket layer, the same encryption that banks and financial institutions use to host personal data online. Now a few other quick notes about security. Relativity requires very strong passwords, so it is going to be mixed with cases, letters, numbers, and symbols. Additionally, with the content being viewed in Native File Viewer or TIFF Image Viewer, everything is streamed directly from the server into memory on the local machine. Nothing is ever written to the temporary internet cache, directory, or hard drive. We can also lock down reviewers by local IP address. So if you have a bunch of contract attorneys who should only be able to hit relativity on site, but you also have a bunch of partners who you want to be able to hit relativity anywhere with an internet connection, we can provide that level of security as well. Finally, relativity provides 2 factors of authentication. If you have an enterprise installation relativity, it even integrates with the Active Directory to provide a single sign-on. So now I'm going to log in to relativity as a power user with a lot of bells and whistles turned on. But I'm going to be demoing a lot of end-user functionality at first, such as viewing native files, coding them, redacting them, tagging, a little browsing, and searching as well. In the end, I'm going to go back as a more basic reviewer to show you firsthand how relativity can really slim down to meet the needs of more contractor reviewers versus a basic reviewer. So first, I'm going to log in as reviewer 1. When I log into Relativity, I am presented with a workspace list, or a list of repositories that the user has access to. The security model in Relativity is highly granular, so we can grant, deny rights to users and groups from anything as large as a case and all of the documents within it to something as small as an individual document. If you have coding data or metadata about that document, annotation layers or redactions on a document, or even features of the application, note that there is no administrative and end-user interface in Relativity. It is one seamless application. We simply grant, deny permissions to our users based on what they need to be efficient in the system and do their job. Additionally, it gives firms the ability to control their own destiny with respect to administrative features. For instance, you have the ability to add new coding forms or new positions of coding forms. You can run productions for the Relativity as well. Even if you're using Relativity through a hosted instance, this gives you the same level of control traditionally that you would only have with an in-house installation. So I've logged into the salt and pepper demo case. Relativity employs a tab-based metaphor for organizing different sections of the application, and by default I'm bounced into document tabs where a bulk of the review will occur. Now if I have access to more administrative features, or the integrated production suite for example, there would be more tabs across the top here. When I don't have these permissions, these tabs disappear from context entirely, so I'm not aware that they even exist. This is a persistent idea with Relativity so that the end user doesn't have permission to something. We're not going to show them grayed out options, but instead we're going to remove the options entirely so they're not even aware that they exist. We find that you can have new reviewers up and productive in Relativity in as little as 10 to 15 minutes of training by presenting them with only the options they need to be efficient in the system to do their jobs. There's a lot of functionality here on this main screen that I'm going to skip over for now while I drill right into a document. This is the core reviewer interface in Relativity. Note that I can jump back to the document list by clicking on this link at the top left. At the top right, I have some options for configuring my display. I can show the doc list above the document. I also have the ability to undock this record for multi-monitor review. I can flip my coding data to the left and document to the right. In the upper left-hand corner, I have an indication of which record I am viewing. In this case, it's A001. You will notice my file icon gives me a visual indication of the kind of record being displayed below in my native file viewer. Here we have an envelope, so I know that it's an email. You'll notice that my cursor changes from an arrow to a hand when I hover over the icon, that I have the ability to download a copy of this file locally. But only if I have been granted the right. In fact, depending on the security requirements of the case or user, we can really lock down the system. You can prevent users from downloading a file, printing a document locally, copying text from the viewer, and running a print screen. So if you have a security sensitive client but doesn't want any information to escape a contractor's reviews workstation, we can provide that level of security. In the upper right hand corner, I have a collaboration tool, and I'm able to email a hyperlink of this record to another member of the review team. If I were to click on this envelope icon, it would fire up Outlook on my machine with the URL in the body and the control number in the subject line. When another member of the review team clicks on that hyperlink, it would be able to authenticate with Relativity, and assuming they have the rights to Relativity itself, the case in the document, they would be bounced right into the core reviewer's interface and the document in question. If they didn't have all the necessary permissions, that link wouldn't do any good. The series of radar buttons above the document store different versions of the document relativity. Right now we're looking at this record in our native file viewer, which I'll come back to in a minute. But I can also look at this document in its original native application as a TIFF image of the document, and that's whether we're doing some TIFFing on the fly inside of relativity. If it's a paper-based collection that's been scanned and coded ahead of time, or if it's a small electronic collection that made sense to go to TIFF before review. I can look at the extracted text or OCR associated with the record. And finally, every time this document is produced, it stores a produced copy alongside the original for a quick, easy reference. I'll come back and talk a little bit more about that later in the demo as well. Now let's go back to our native file viewer. Cura licensed the technology from Oracle Stellent called Outside In, the same technology you may be familiar with from a program called Quick Preview Plus. It allows us to get a high-fidelity, static rendering of the file on the fly without the need to convert to TIFF, PDF, HTML behind the scenes. So we can give the users the speed and control that they're used to in a TIFF-based review without the time and cost normally associated with conversions. Because we have licensed the technology and gotten our hooks into it, Relativity lets users interact with native files in richer ways that would then be able to do in other systems that convert to low-resolution TIFF or HTML behind the scenes. For instance, we can go in and copy out text of the viewer and paste it into a search engine to conduct a search. You can also run Relativity Analytics, which is a set of concept searches, categorization, and clustering features right within the application. You'll also note that right now the terms relativity and document are already highlighted for us. This is a concept referred to as persistent highlighting. What this will allow me to do is anytime in the review process, feed relativity a list of terms, maybe a list of potentially privileged words or key players in a case, and have them keyed out to reviewers regardless of whether or not this actual user generated search criteria. They can also be color-coded, for instance, contextual recognition. So maybe magenta here is a privileged word and green indicates a key player. Additionally, to the left of the viewer we have our persistent highlighting tree. The persistent highlighting tree allows users to control which hits what they want on a term set level and provide instant contextual recognition as to which hits are contained within a record or the frequency of those hits. They are completely securable from user to user and from group to group. Now I'm going to shuffle through a couple of file types so you can get a feel for how they are going to render in our native file viewer. Here we have an Excel spreadsheet. You'll notice that I maintain some control over the document. I can resize my columns, get persistent highlighting, and I can use these blue arrows to navigate from hit to hit. So if I were to do a keyword search and it returns a hit for 12,000 rows into an Excel file, I can use these blue arrows to jump straight to my hit and have it keyed out for me instead of having to wade through that Excel nightmare. Here we have a PowerPoint presentation. Note that I still have my persistent highlighting and I can use those blue arrows to jump from hit to hit, and it will make me through the various slides in which those hits occur. Here we have a Word document in Korean. Relativity is fully Unicode compliant, so you can load, search, and display foreign languages, double byte languages, and CJK characters. You can get persistent highlighting, tagging, and coding. You can copy foreign words out of the viewer, paste them, submit them to a search engine, TIFF them. All of the same functionality you can get with English language documents is available in foreign language documents in Relativity. One of the pain points in native file review is that sometimes these files contain embedded content. Because the native file viewer only shows you the finalized version of the document, it isn't always evident to the reviewer that the embedded content exists. In Relativity, we can actually configure the system to throw an alert to our reviewers to let them know that this type of data is present. So here we see an alert that says, this document contains track changes and comments. Please view the image for this record to see the hidden context. I'm going to click OK and flip over the image, and as you can see, we're already able to TIFF this document on the fly with track changes and comments included, and I can make a coding decision on it from there. Are there any questions or comments on Relativity's native file review before we look at redacting and annotations in Relativity?